A quiet night shift at a 24-hour library in Michigan is about to get a lot more interesting. An accidental hole in the wall leads to a very unexpected discovery. A book so dangerous that reading from it isn't even the worry. Its simple existence is death.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Enrique Couto, and we have quite the chilling show for you tonight as we head to Battle Creek, Michigan, and a 24-hour library that harbors some dark secrets. But before we get to that, I want to say very much how thankful I am to have you here listening. As we head into the Halloween season, we'll have lots of new spookies joining us, but you, listening right now in the dead of summer, are truly the hardcore, the die-hard spookies, like myself, who revel in celebrating Halloween every single week. And I sure am happy to have you here. So thank you. And if you haven't yet, go to your favorite podcasting app like Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you're subscribed and leave us a 5-star rating. Help other spookies know they're in the right place. And join us over on Facebook by searching Weekly Spooky's Tomb of Terror. It's our little spot on the internet where we hang out and share scary stories, memes, and so much more. Myself and many of the authors like to hang out there and have a good time. So, check out Weekly Spooky's Tomb of Terror on Facebook. And if you love what we're doing and want to support us in a very direct way, you can go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get 2 bonus shows every single month. And I promise you, they're a hell of a lot of fun. And there's over 5 years of previous content for you to enjoy as well. Just go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on Patreon. But now, my friends, as the sun goes down, I don't know about you, but I need a book. So, let's all head to the library after these quick words. Book Return by Douglas Waltz. While I never would have referred to my position as night librarian at the Battle Creek Public Library as a dream job, it did have its benefits. The majority of the denizens of the city, most popularly known as Serial City, had no clue the library stayed open 24 hours a day, which was fine by me. Few patrons meant less work. Luckily, I was something of a night owl to begin with. It was a frosty February 29th when I arrived at the library promptly at 10 o'clock. I greeted the last of the day librarians, Jeannie, who had worked for the library for some 25 years. She gave me the same amused look every day when I came in the door. Jeannie was used to the eccentrics of the library, founded by W.K. Kellogg of Kellogg cereal fame. He was the one who said that the library should always be open, except for Sundays. Even Kellogg knew not to mess with the church-going folks of Battle Creek, Michigan. Jeannie left me to my own devices, and I went around the library tidying up, putting books back in their proper places. I went to check the return bin and found just a single book. It was a very old history book of the area, written by Jerome Blackwell, an infamous local author who wrote detailed accounts of the area in the late 1800s. It was odd to see it in the return bin, It belonged upstairs in the stacks where we kept the reference books that weren't available for checkout. How in the hell did it manage to get checked out? Someone probably snagged it and snuck it out. A lot of the books in the stacks didn't have the little device that would set off the alarm if you tried to take it out of the library. I checked to see if anyone was actually in the library and found Carl Eberhardt sitting comfortably, reading a magazine. I told him I had to head upstairs, and he nodded in response without looking up from whatever he was reading. Even in the daylight, the upstairs was always a little creepy. Poorly lit, with mountains of books on sagging shelves. The book belonged on the back wall, so as I made my way towards its place in the organized mess, my toe hit the edge of one of the bookshelves, propelling me forward and down towards the back wall. The hefty tome in my hand struck the wall next to the back wall and went through the plasterboard like it was tissue paper. Dust filled my nostrils, as well as a terrible smell. For a brief moment, I thought I might have found a leaky sewer pipe, but when I used the light from my phone, I saw the hole was quite dry, and the smell had started to dissipate. I saw something that looked like brown leather and reached in to see what it was. It was a large leather-bound book, and I needed to break away more of the wallboard to free it from its hiding place. It felt heavier than it should be for its size. I decided to take it downstairs in a better light to examine my find. Carl was still reading his magazine when I came back downstairs. I put the book on the front counter and reached under for a roll of paper towels so I could gently remove the dust. The book was in great shape for being stuck in a wall for so long. Brown ornate leather binding and what appeared to be gold leaf, with what appeared to be a single word embossed on the leather. Interitus. My Latin was rusty, so I checked Google Translate on my phone. It meant destruction. That seemed to be pretty basic. What could a book named Destruction be about? I started to carefully open the book when a voice, feeling like it was next to my ear, said, "What's that there?" I flinched at the unexpected noise and looked up to see that Carl had made his way over to the counter and was standing across from me. "It's an old book I found upstairs." "Pretty fancy, ain't it?" "Yes, Carl, it is pretty fancy." "What's that word on the front?" "Ain't English." "No, it's Latin. It means destruction." "And you were gonna open it?" "What?" "The book. The book with the word destruction on the cover, and you thought it might be all right to open it." "Well," I stammered, unused to this much of a conversation with Carl, who, up to now, usually communicated with a nod and a grunt. "It's just a book." Yup, it's a book, but it might be haunted. I seen that in a movie once. Of course, that book was nastier looking than this one. Had a face on it." "A face on it?" "Carl, are you referring to the movie The Evil Dead?" "Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, creepy movie. Guy had a chainsaw hand. That was pretty cool." "Oh, so you watched part 2. "Part 2? They made more than one of those?" "Yes, now I am going to open this book, and if that worries you, you can go home." "Can't." "What do you mean, can't?" "The missus has a bunch of her friends over tonight for some book club." Carl looked at his watch. "I got another hour before I dare show my ass at the house." "Book club? That's nice. What book are they reading?" "Beats me. They usually use it as an excuse to drink a bunch of wine and gossip." I almost laughed at that. "Well, Carl, I'm still going to open the book. I would expect that it's written in Latin, and Latin is not something that I'm fluent in." "Okay. Your funeral. I'm a head over to the liquor store and get a road pop." And with that, Carl abruptly turned around and left the library. I stood there for a moment watching him leave before returning my attention to the tome on the counter. What did Carl know? I asked myself as I looked at the book. Hell, he didn't even know there was a part 1 for The Evil Dead. How does someone just watch the sequel to a movie? Probably had never even heard of Army of Darkness. I slowly opened the book, the leather and binding protesting at the movement. Suddenly, the book flipped open, and a swirling miasma of black and purple from the book sent me flying back into the shelf behind the counter where we held books for people. A bright light filled my vision when the back of my head connected with the edge of a shelf. Then, everything went black. The next thing I heard was, of all things, Carl. I opened my eyes and everything was blurry for a moment. My vision focused and I saw his face. Carl? I came back to see what happened when you opened the book. It seems you took a nasty fall. What happened? I told him about the explosion from the book, the weird colors, and how it made me fall back into the shelf. He nodded and smiled attentively as I told my story. Then he helped me up from the floor. I was amazed at how strong he was. He lifted me like I was a child, my feet coming off the floor for a moment. Well, you don't seem any worse for wear, my lad. He continued to smile at me. Then it clicked, my mind playing back what had just happened. Carl's speech patterns. His unnatural strength. Carl's smile faded. Oh my, I seem to have made a mistake, haven't I? What gave it away? The strength, I suppose. Was this human a weakling? I shook my head. You don't talk like Carl. Carl had a 7th grade education before he dropped out of school to work on his father's farm. Ah, well, I'm afraid that I don't absorb any memories when I inhabit a lesser form. And you are? Oh, I go by many names. I prefer Ulupoka. Ulupoka? That sounds like something from the Pacific Islands. Very good, my boy. Polynesian, to be exact. And you ended up in a book. How exactly? Long story that I really don't have time to go into. Things to do, you see. Things to do? My mind was swimming with confusion. Maybe I was still unconscious and this was all just a bad dream triggered by my conversation with Carl. You're quite the little parrot, aren't you? I cause death, disease, and destruction wherever I go. My most recent attempt was shortly after the Christian missionaries arrived in the islands you know as Hawaii. Bastards managed to trap me in that damnable volume, and there I lay for... what year is it? It's 2024. Carl's brow deepened, and I swore I could see sparks of red fire in his eyes. That has been a very long time. Shall we start with you? Excuse me? Carl grabbed me by the collar and flung me across the main lobby. I landed in the children's area with a massive thud. Lucky for me, we had these giant foam blocks the children played with, and Jeannie stacked them in a huge pile when she was bored. I landed on them, and the only thing that hurt was the back of my head from my previous fall. I quickly got to my feet and saw what had once been Carl turn into a huge monster hurtling towards me. My feet were frozen in place with fear, and I knew that I was doomed. Demon! Came a bellowing voice from the front doors, stopping Ulupoka in its tracks. We both turned to see a tall, lanky man with long, crazy gray hair and a matching tangled beard that went past his chest. He wore a long black coat, and in his hand was a staff of carved white wood with a large green gem embedded in the top. And you are? Ulupoka/Carl asked. Who I am is meaningless. What I am is the instrument of your destruction. Old man, better men have tried. Even the gods tried and managed to take my head. But still I am alive and here to wreak destruction on this paltry globe. Ulupoka turned away from me to move towards the old man. Then I realized who he was. It was Jerome Blackwell, the historian. No one had seen him in decades. Most people believed him dead. But here he was, alive and well, confronting a monster I had unknowingly unleashed upon the earth. I name you Ulupoka, and bring with me your final time on earth. He walked over to the counter where the book still lay open and lifted it into his right arm. "What are you going to do, old man? Throw the book at me?" Ulupoka thought that was funny and erupted into a huge, bellowing laugh. "No, ignorant one. The spell that bound you to this tome was broken when this idiot opened the book." It took me a second to realize I was the idiot, and sheepishly turned my head. "Yet you believe you can destroy me. Me, Ulupoka!" "Yes, windbag, I do. You see, the missionaries that bound you to this book managed to get one thing right. The book and you slowly become one in the centuries that you were together. One cannot exist without the other." A light of understanding burned in Ulupoka's gaze, and he hurtled towards Jerome to take the book. But to no avail. Jerome produced a lighter and set fire to the pages of the open book. The ancient parchment was desiccated. Little moisture existed in its pages. The book flared with a mighty whoosh, and Jerome dropped it to the floor. Ulupoka/Carl let loose with an unholy scream and dropped to the floor. Jerome went to the counter and took the metal trash can that stood on the floor next to it, bringing it closer to the book still blazing. He carefully took the plastic garbage bag from the can and set it aside. Then, using his stick, he lifted the burning book into the can and dropped it in. He used his foot to put out the smoldering carpet and looked at me with a sigh. "When the book is finished burning, stir the ashes, then dispose of them in multiple places." He turned to leave. "Wait!" I called after him. He turned back to face me. "What happened here?" "You were irresponsible," was all he said. He walked with long strides from the building and was gone. I heard a groan that made me jump and realized that it was coming from Carl's prone form on the floor. "Carl, is it you?" Carl shook his head and slowly got to his feet. "Opened the book, did ya?" I had nothing to say. Carl brushed himself off, gave me a dirty look, and staggered out the front door. He stopped once to call me an idiot, and then he too was gone. I stood in the center of the lobby, getting my bearings, and then went in search of something to stir the ashes of the burning book. I hope you enjoyed that story as much as I did, Spookies. Big thank you to Doug Waltz for tonight's story. Short, sweet, and spooky is what I live by. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode, and I want to let you know that this Friday, we're publishing a very special compilation of some of the greatest episodes of Weekly Spooky over its over 5 years. And this time around, we're focusing on the works of Splatter Joe Salmo. So, tune in on Friday to hear 6 classic tales of terror of the sickening variety, all courtesy of our good buddy Joe. Releasing this Friday right here on the Weekly Spooky feed, so make sure you're subscribed. And I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon backers. We have over 100 of you, and we really do appreciate it. You Spookies help keep the show going and going by heading to WeeklySpooky.com, clicking on Patreon, and for as little as $1 a month, getting 2 bonus shows every single month. And I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Brent McCullough, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you so much. And if you want to hear your name at the end of the show in my silky smooth voice, just head to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and select the $15 or higher. Your support means so much to me. I can't thank you enough. But for now, my friends, it's time for me to get back to work. 31 episodes in 31 days, plus my birthday is coming up on September 10th, so I've got a lot on my plate. So for myself, for my executive producers Rob Fields, Mark Shields, and Bobbletopia.com, my producer Dan Wilder, and my composer Ray Mattis, well, I suppose all that's left to say is, I will be talking at you next time.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.